Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. Got another deep dive with a political leader tonight. Very excited to bring you. We've had her on the show before. She's always a boatload of fun, if not slightly challenging to like a herd of cats that need to be herded at the same time. But she always has very, very witty remarks and very insightful commentary. So very excited to welcome back to the show tonight, leader. I'm not saying the interim part, leader of the Alberta Party, none other than Lindsay Amantea. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us again tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Was the introduction okay?
Yep. Oh yeah. It was you one day you'll get my name right.
Oh, did I get it wrong again?
It's all of the A's are pronounced the same.
Amantea?
Amantea.
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 Yeah.
I almost want to redo the introduction now.
It's fine. Let me mock you.
It is deserved, so you fill your boots. We got you on for a couple of different reasons tonight. And we got a lot of ground to cover, so I want to get right into it. One of the first things that I want to talk about with you, because for anybody who's unfamiliar, you have a not insubstantial background in the legal things. You're a practicing lawyer.
I am a practicing lawyer here in Calgary, and so yes, my day job, unlike many of the other leaders of parties in Alberta, I have a job I have to go to all day, every day. So I am a practicing lawyer. I generally work in mergers and acquisitions, but that doesn't preclude me from dabbling in other fun areas of the law. And I'm slowly but surely going to represent at least one client in front of every single regulatory body in this province.
Ooh,
working on it. I got a bingo card going.
Are you allowed to talk about that?
Google my name, you'll figure it out.
Cool. That's what I'm doing as soon as we're done. The reason why I wanted to highlight your legal credentials is because the first thing that I want to ask you about tonight has to do with some new legislation that was passed by the United Conservative Party. You have the lens of being both a lawyer and a leader of a political party in Alberta. One of the things that's been abundantly clear in the province of Alberta with the United Conservative Party, even pre-Smith, which is, I think, important to highlight, because Kenny was very, very good at the secrets too. It's been well established. Charles Rusnell put out a series of articles that highlighted very effectively that the UCP administration had encouraged people to adopt communication channels that were outside of the norm or the official in order to circumvent FOIP requests. Alberta has been named as being a province that has some of the most problematic FOIP stuff going on. For anybody who's unfamiliar, by FOIP I mean Freedom of Information Program, or Freedom of Information Act. If I want to be, I'm sure you were going to correct me on that. But
you've already said three things I'm going to correct. Don't worry.
Perfect. So with the FOIP piece, what do you make of the changes that were introduced in the legislature?
So that is the first thing I was going to correct. Nothing's been passed. It is the UCP. This government has introduced a bill into the legislature, Bill 34, which deals specifically with the Freedom of Information Act and requests made thereunder. And so, to give some color to butthurt emails, you all may remember that exactly these kinds of issues are one of the many reasons Hillary Clinton is not president, or was never became president. And so freedom of information, the program itself is on one hand, a great way, or the only way that a lot of people can get information from the government about what is going on inside of the ministries, inside of the actual um, mechanics of government. And when I say government, I mean the ministry side, the actual workings of government, including the political parts of the ministries. And so the departments, the ministries are subject to laws that require um, uh, disclosure of certain communications, disclosure of decision making, things like that. And so realistically, the purpose of this is to shed light and to make sure that political decisions or decisions that are tinged politically, or the decisions of the people we are paying to run our country and our province, are being done in a way that isn't secretive, isn't malicious. It's being where they're following good governance. They're following proper conflicts of interest, things like that. And so when you look at that in that background, this bill is problematic in a couple of ways. I mean, it is obviously under the guise of you know updating the act. The act hasn't been fundamentally changed in a long time. We're talking decades, and so trying to update it to make sure that we're working in legislation that fundamentally matches the reality of our lives, which is emails, text messages, cell phones. A lot of that wasn't really addressed in the previous act or in the act as it is now, and so those things are all really good. Like the problem we're going to have is that freedom of information requests are usually done by people who are looking for stories. They are done by people who are looking to rectify actions that maybe were made really opaquely. They're people trying to hold the government to account, and adding things like having to appeal to the department first before you appeal to the commissioner. The delays that are being introduced in this process are going to cause people to abandon their requests, I think, in a greater number, and not really, push some of these things forward. Same thing with some of the delays being put in terms of I know it doesn't seem like a very big deal, but changing something from 30 days to 30 business days, well, that, you've added weeks to a request. So not only have we added another layer to where you're getting a final decision from the privacy commissioner, but you're also adding each of these steps is going to be longer as well. And so for an individual or someone trying to, really understand or challenge a decision of a department, it's going to increase costs. It's going to increase wait times, which are already horribly long. And it is going to cause people to abandon more of these requests at an earlier stage, because they're not going to get to that final stage where they're really having an independent body and an independent person looking into what is going on, whether or not there should be disclosure, and what that disclosure should look like. I mean, it does increase the rights of the departments to voluntarily disclose without having to get an order. But the likelihood of that happening is there are certain departments who have always been really good. There are certain departments who have always just straight up don't even bother looking. I've been the subject of FOIP requests before, and I've always had a really positive interaction with the office in terms of stuff that I've submitted to the government, where I've actually had the government come back and ask if there's certain things that should be redacted, personal information, things like that, out of my communications with a government department before they're fulfilling a FOIP request. And so in that respect, I've always had the utmost respect for the department itself, because they do a very good job of reaching out, especially when it's, that would have been in my capacity as a lawyer or as a private citizen. So like the department itself is really good. It's horribly understaffed. It's the reason things are taking so long. And I think that this is going to result in a government that has less accountability, which we know it doesn't need right now, and less oversight. And all of that's even before you start looking at the fact that political communications are going to be exempted from this. So, we wouldn't have known about things like the hockey tickets or, some of the bigger issues. I mean, obviously, this government has dealt with a lot of those by simply changing the laws around them now, in a way that perhaps was not the best. But they've just changed the law to suit themselves. I assure you, if Justin Trudeau did something like that, you would have conservatives jumping off a cliff into I'm going to jokingly say a lake of fire. So they would be up in arms if the federal government were responding to the discoveries of FOIP requests with simply changing the law to make it not illegal. So it's difficult to grapple with. I understand why this is happening. This is par for the course with this UCP government. And at the end of the day, anyone who's telling you that this is going to make things better is a liar. Yes, I'm calling Nally a liar.
Well, you're not the only one. But that's where I think one of the pieces of this, and the note that you ended on, I think that's where one of the pieces of this gets to be so Orwellian is not the word that I want to use, but I feel like I have to, because they're making these changes that are going to make it more difficult and more challenging for people to get access to the information. They've also made some changes in regards to political staffers and communications with political staffers being exempt and not defining what a political staffer is. I have questions about that I'm going to ask in a sec. But they're doing all of this under the guise of increasing transparency. And there is a level of, like, there's no question that this government is getting better and better and better at the doublespeak. Danielle Smith put out a tweet today. Well, not just a tweet, but a variety of social media posts where she listed off 5 or 6 things that make Alberta so wonderful. It included eliminating coal. I have questions about the grassy slopes. It included Alberta's commitment to human rights. We're going to talk about that later. It included having a reliable electricity grid. And it's like, none of these things are true. Literally everything that you listed off, that you've said that you're taking to other countries to talk about how great Alberta is, we're doing that's the opposite of reality. And there's this commitment to doublespeak that I think we see in this FOIP legislation, proposed FOIP legislation, that
are you sure you weren't looking at the Danielle Smith pitch bot?
It was not. I know, right? But it wasn't. Right? I went to her Instagram to double check, and it was a very well curated and designed social media spread that was just the complete opposite of reality, which is pretty wild. So I'm curious what you make of the communications that they've done around the FOIP piece. But that extend wider, because this is a government that has talked about their commitment to transparency while making the FOIP process more opaque. How does the average Albertan navigate that? Like, how does the average Albertan look at the social media post from Smith and go, oh, Danielle Smith's doing all these great. I could have sworn I had like threats of a power outage, but other than that, Danielle Smith's doing all of these great things. Like, how do you hold a government to account that just willfully lies?
Well, I've said it before, even on here, but this government and this premier is anti-trans anything, transparency, trans kids. I don't know, pick another word. Um, she is anti-trans, just all of the things. Transportation.
Transition.
I transition. I could keep going. It's tonight is not boggle night. But I laugh so that I don't cry. But I mean, ultimately, it's people need to be vigilant, and it every single time. What I would tell people is, if you feel like you're being gaslit, it's because you are. And if you feel like it's making you question your sanity, it's because it is. And those feelings are valid feelings, is what I'm going to tell every single person. Do not feel like you are the only person who's like, I could have sworn I did have we all had to turn off our lights that one night to make sure we didn't have a power outage. And I could have sworn, that that's actually just not true. Question everything. As one of my social studies teachers in high school used to say, it's question authority, question everything. I sound like I'm going to arm a militia, but I promise I'm not. Um,
Well, the
today.
Bill of Rights, the new Bill of Rights has got the guns, so
Yeah, it's got the guns. It's got the guns, and don't get me wrong. I like shooting the guns. It's fun at targets, not people. And so, um, question it. And if you are feeling like what you're hearing is at odds with what you perceive to be reality, um, that very well might be the case. You're not a conspiracy theorist by thinking that it just isn't jiving, because it's not. And that's the disconcerting aspect of this government. We've talked about it a bunch of times. It's whether it's the FOIP legislation, which is annoying but is not life threatening to anybody. For the most part, some FOIP requests are for reasons that are much more serious than most FOIP requests. I would perhaps point everyone not to an Alberta example, but in Manitoba with kids, Indigenous kids in care. A lot of the changes that came in respect of that came because of FOIP requests and information discovered through FOIP requests to that government. And so that is the power of those. Not everything is going to be, hockey tickets and ridiculous gifts. Some of it really does matter. And this is how we hold governments to account when the opposition won't. And so that's, the power of it. That is how individuals and everyday Albertans can hold this government to account if and when they feel like other politicians aren't doing their jobs.
I want to again, like I'm just before we move on to the next topic, it feels somewhat like there are always governments that have always done the we don't want you to find our dirty laundry, please. But it feels like the game of we're going to go out of our way to make sure that we're able to have the things that we believe that we're entitled to make sure that you can't find out as easily when we're taking advantage of our positions. It feels like this is some next level stuff. Like the scandal that damaged Kenny as much as anything, I think, for many people was the skybox where he was on the patio of the, ironically enough, Alison Redford skybox, having dinner with multiple ministers while there were COVID restrictions on.
I think you mean the Sky Palace.
Yes, sorry, so many skies. It was
No, Sky Palace.
little box of a patio. Well, ironically,
Yes.
Alison Redford is now on the board of Invest Alberta, which is where another one of the board members' tickets came from. So it all over the Venn diagram's just a series of Olympic rings.
It's a circle. It's the Venn diagram is a circle.
Yeah. But thank you for the correction. The Sky Palace photos. That was
Yes.
that was a thing that turned a lot of people against Kenny, because it was very much him saying, "I'm better than you," but he never denied, yeah, no, I was doing it. There was the Matt Wolfs came out and they were like, well, if you measure the distance by using this as an example and the size of a bottle, they were maybe within the six, maybe outside of the 6 feet. It was very, very stupid. But Kenny never came out and said, I didn't do it. And by the way, I created a ministerial exemption by which I can do these things and you can't. That's that hurt him. And we now have a government that is saying, oh no, I want the Sky Palace, the Sky Box tickets. So in order to, like, the Premier of Alberta literally went on the Real Talk with Ryan Jesperson and said, yeah, no, I would like to be able to hang out in the owners' boxes for longer periods of time. So I'm thinking of rewriting the ethics laws. And mind-boggling, the host said, no, that makes perfect sense to me. I don't get it myself. I think that
there are so many issues with all of that, and I mean, what I would say is, first off, I don't know if it was the pictures or it was the comment about the budget whiskey. I don't know that that's a budget. What's a budget whiskey? Anyways, neither here nor there. But I think ultimately, there is a role for a level or certain things to be, secret or confidential in a government. Not every decision requires the same level of scrutiny. And ultimately, in hard cases, there are going to be decisions where the conversation or the discussion around it should be confidential to allow people to have a frank and full discussion. And those things happen, particularly in just dilemmas where there is no good outcome, or it's incredibly difficult to talk about, or it's a really sensitive topic. We want our government officials to be able to have full and frank discussions in those cases. And the fear of being FOIPed is a real one, because it will mean that people aren't going to voice unpopular opinions that might be still correct. So, to that extent, I am going to say there are reasons to have some confidentiality, particularly at the cabinet level, particularly at a deputy minister level, where where things are going to be politically sensitive. You don't want those things to be necessarily FOIPable. Which, yes, is in fact a verb, or an adverb. But we're not talking about sensitive information. We're not talking about, frank discussions. And to be honest, if we could trust this government that that's what they were using it for, I think that people would have a better sense of this, or a better feeling about this. But given the track record of the Smith government, I think that this is about skybox tickets and wanting to say mean things about other people, and generally asking for favors for their friends. I don't think to protect the kinds of conversations I was just referring to that ought to be protected. This is a carte blanche to do and say whatever they want, and only be subject to what someone can reasonably find out or figure out. I mean, part of the Sky Palace nonsense with Kenny was there was a photo that went with it, right? Someone had taken a photo and then it was corroborated by the FOIP request, right? So there was already a photo. And then it was, like I said, given context by that FOIP request. So I think that this is damaging to our democracy, is what I think it is. I think it's damaging to our faith in government. I think this is going to be problematic. And if I were an MLA, I'd be up in arms about it.
I guess the question that I want to ask is, here's my interpretation of it in a nutshell. We just did our big deep dive episode on the Skybox scandal, and the reality of the situation remains The only reason why that story broke, and for the record, it was a Vancouver sports photographer who took the picture that broke the whole thing wide. Two pictures that broke the whole thing wide open. Um, the only reason why the story broke is because those pictures were published and people went, wait, what? She's in a skybox? What's going on here? And that has led to some ministers disclosing at press conferences that they did attend hockey games as guests of the Sam Raish, who's the gentleman who did the Vanch masks and did the Turkish Tylenol and all of that. But this legislative change doesn't make it easier for the public to find out how did nobody in the room say this guy's done $250 million of business with the Alberta government. Should we maybe be careful about a conflict before everybody goes rushing to hang out in his elite skybox? We'll never get the answer to that question, barring a brave staffer coming forward or barring a brave minister coming forward. We'll never find out what the institutional failures were that allowed for this situation to get where it did. And it seems to me that this legislation is only going to make it harder for people to get closer to those kinds of answers in, God forbid, similar situations in the future. Am I reading it wrong?
You're not. And I mean, I think the one thing I would add to that is, and I know this is a relatively recent phenomenon in Alberta, this thing where we change parties in government. I know. But what I would say is the reality is when you change a government, when you change a party in government, notwithstanding you are not supposed to do this, a lot of things simply go missing. And so, files get shredded back when that was a thing. Drives get wiped. All of a sudden, oh, I didn't have any emails from before 3 months ago. I don't know what you're talking about. And so it's, I just routinely delete them all. And so, if you can't get the information in real time, and when I say real time, I mean relatively recent, not like insofar as FOIP is behind. But if you can't get it in real time, you're never going to get it.
Yeah.
So it's not only will it make it harder, it will make it impossible.
Awesome. That's great news. Let's talk about AIMCO. Because
one dumpster fire to the next.
We'll do a hard pivot there. For anybody who is unfamiliar, a brief summary. Out of nowhere, by all accounts, Finance Minister Nate Horner walked into a leadership meeting of the AIMCO senior leadership and board and fired everybody. Fired the board, fired the CEO. And replaced himself as the board chair and president of AIMCO for a period of up to 30 days, and has since brought in a new CEO. He's a bit of a historical government bureaucrat. No discernible experience in pensions that we've been able to locate, but do with that what you will. And now the search is on for the new board, the new chair. Before we talk about who might be the new board chair, worst kept secret in everything, what did you make of the decision to fire everybody?
Oh my Lord. I mean, this government has a track record now of just firing boards it doesn't like. This is not the first time. This is, I think, the third full board that's been fired by this government. And so, to give even more context for the listeners, why does AIMCO matter? AIMCO is the sixth largest pension fund in the country. It has $168 billion under management, and notably, it is now the home of the Alberta Teachers Association pensions. So the ATA, or all of the teachers, were forced to roll their pensions into AIMCO under management. I want to say 12 months ago, but I could be wrong on that timing. Everything has blurred together. And so the reason it matters is because it is a lot of money that is now being directly controlled by this government, by a minister. And so the CEO being referred to is actually a deputy minister who's been around forever. I think he's just a decently good administrator. And so while he may or may not have any background in pensions, I think he has a decent background in like running stuff. So, I mean, I think I'm less concerned about that in the short term. But what I am concerned about is, and particularly in conjunction with the fact that we probably won't be able to FOIP it shortly, is how this decision got made. To tie that back together, because there is no discernible reason why this happened. I mean, don't get me wrong, AIMCO, not doing the best, underperforms the market, would not put my money there, personally. But it hasn't necessarily been the board that's been the cause of that. A lot of it has been politically motivated decisions that have been forced down this board's throats. And so, you know, not to speculate, but totally to speculate. What I think happened is that there was direction given to make certain investments. I assume that they were not good investments. I assume that the board did not want to make those investments, and here we are with the board. This board was hired by this government. And now they've been fired by this government. Explain that to me. Explain to me how a board that you handpicked pissed you off enough that you had to go fire them all. What did they do? I would love to know. I would love an explanation from Minister Horner about exactly what happened and why this was a completely necessary thing. It's not like we've heard anything about dysfunctional boards. It's not like we've heard anything about, you know, infighting or anything like that. There's been no context. It's not like some of the other boards where, you know, I think it was was it the dance center where the board was a bit dysfunctional and so they fired everybody? Yeah. So like, but there were warning bells going off there where I thought it was extreme, but it's not like you can look at it and go, okay, I see how you got from A to B. I don't agree with the B, but whatever. And so here, there were no warning bells, right? Unless you're just going to say like you weren't performing well, right? But again, that's not the board's job. That's the CEO's job. So yeah, go fire the CEO, right?
But even on the CEO piece, like there's an interesting little bit of it's not quite revisionist history, but it's close. Because you've heard the government come out and say, oh, it was $2 billion. AIMCO lost $2 billion in 2019. That's a lot of money to lose. My gosh. And yes, that's true. That happened. That CEO who oversaw that loss, it left. There was a new CEO who's the guy who just got fired, who hasn't lost $2 billion to my knowledge, who is the one who was fired. So it's they're playing with the, well, here's what happened, kids, a little bit disingenuously. And there have been, to your point about the speculation, there have been public allegations that the AIMCO board was looking for the highest return on investment for the money that they had, and they were looking internationally to achieve that. And there has been public statements made by people making allegations that some people, I don't know, maybe the premier of Alberta, would rather have seen that money invested in Alberta. And the board said, no, we have a fiduciary duty to do our thing. And then they got fired. Those are allegations that have been unproven in a court of law and all of that. So, you know, the listener could do with that.
Definitely.
But it certainly tracks. And we have not seen anybody from the government come out and say, no, it wasn't because we wanted to see more investment in Alberta. It was because they had too many pizza parties or something. I don't know.
It's gonna be a lot of pizza.
One would
But I mean,
think.
you look at one would think, but you look at sort of there's two pretty good examples of pension plan or pension funds in Canada where you have very different uh, sort of, I wouldn't say raison d'etre, but like goals. So if you look at the Canadian pension plan versus the Quebec pension plan for the funds, the CPP has spent and under Martin had created the investment board and has done a really good job of increasing the value of the fund, um, because their sole goal was to increase the fund no matter how they did it, right? And so, to that extent, I don't know if you know this, but the CPP was a huge investor in Skype, and made like mad cash when it got sold to Microsoft, and has a track record of just making some pretty amazing investments that have returned and have brought the CPP back from the brink of, the anticipated collapse as our population ages. And so they have been given a mandate to simply increase the fund. Whereas if you look at the Quebec pension fund, they have a mandate. Their second mandate is to increase the fund, but their first mandate is to reinvest in Quebec. And so they have consistently underperformed the Canadian pension plan. But it's because their first mandate isn't to increase the fund, it is to reinvest. Now, AIMCO has never had a mandate to reinvest in Alberta. That hasn't been the purpose of the fund. It has been to increase the fund. And so I think it's super disingenuous of this government to come in and say, well, you may have been doing the thing you were mandated to do, but we don't like it, so we're going to change it. And here's the thing: if you give a mandate of reinvest in Alberta first, make money second, which I think is stupid, and I say that not because I don't love Alberta, I do, but I think that you can't play fast and loose with people's retirements. That is money people need to live on. That is money they need to be able to stop working, enjoy their lives, and not have to work until they're 75, 80 years old to afford to be able to live in this world. And so we need to be cognizant of what is the mandate. And if the mandate is invest in Alberta first, fine, make that the mandate. But don't make people have to invest their pensions in this fund then.
I mean, one of the things that strikes me about the whole investing in Alberta, and again, it's not anti-Albertan to say people should be able to rely on their pensions, their public service pensions. That's not an anti-Albertan sentiment. If anything, I would argue it's pro-Albertan. The thing that I keep going back to is I remember a few years ago when I started to do some brief investing things. One of the conversations that I had with the investor that I was working with was, do you want to invest in, here's how it works. You can go with safe investments where you'll get a little bit of return. You'll make some money. It's not bad.
Yep.
Or you can go with high risk investments where you potentially could make a lot more money if the universe aligns, but you could also lose money. So it's not just now it's a question of I put in $5. I'd like to at least get my $5 back. If I do a low risk investment, I might get $5.25 back. That's not bad. If I do a high risk investment, I might not get any of it back. And when a direction is given to invest, like I can imagine a scenario. It's not a leap for me to imagine a scenario where Danielle Smith says, "Hey, you know what? I really want to. The only way that we're going to beat the federal government's emissions targets, because it turns out the Sovereignty Act is a wet paper tiger. The only way that we're going to do it is if we go all in on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And so we go all in on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And then it does turn out that in 30, 20 years, the world goes, you know what? Solar's kind of cool. We got these fancy new batteries that we didn't have 20 years ago. We don't want the oil and gas out of the oil sands anymore. So long, thanks for all the fish. And the investment is now toast.
And this scenario you've outlined is the incredible risk of using a pension fund for political purposes, which should not be done. It is not the job of all the hardworking Albertans who put into this pension fund to allow this government to use it as a piggy bank. Not what it is. It is not the government's piggy bank. And that is what will happen if this continues down this path. That is not the purpose of a pension fund.
I got two other things I want to hit you on with the AIMCO piece. One of them is there's been some concerns raised that getting rid of this board and refocusing, restructuring, they like to redo things a lot, this government does, is in some way to set the stage for an Alberta pension plan. Smith has mused at having AIMCO manage an Alberta pension plan. I'm going to ask this question in two ways. So first question is, what do you make of that? And second question is, I'm going to ask you to put your leader hat on. And where does the Alberta Party stand on Alberta pension plan?
Well, I'm gonna give you it all as one answer, and the answer is, as the Alberta Party, we believe in efficient, effective government, and hiring a whole new set of people to administer a separate plan from the CPP is bonkers. It is not efficient. It is costly, and we will. No. Our answer is no. This is ridiculous. I cannot say it in strong enough terms. There is a reason why we have the CPP. There is a reason why there are efficiencies in having taxes collected by one entity and having them remitted back. There is no good reason that anyone can give me, or has given me, at least to date, about why we need an Alberta pension plan. Why? Why make it harder for people moving in and out of this province? Why make it harder, for a government that likes to say that it and particularly doesn't like civil servants? Why would you hire more of them? What purpose does this other than control? What purpose does this serve? Unless, again, you are giving it a mandate to invest in Alberta first, which, again, may not mean you have a retirement to rely on.
And I think it's important to and I know that this is a somewhat contentious issue for some folks, but Danielle Smith and the UCP have made it clear that they will use taxpayers' money for political investments and political gains. And what I'm talking about is the whole argument around the halal mortgages. Because this is a product that is currently offered on the private market from more than one source. And the government of Alberta has introduced potential changes to legislation to mandate the Alberta Treasury Branch, which is a crown corporation funded by taxpayer dollars, to provide halal mortgages through subsidiary corporations whose guiding principles will not be the best return on investment for Alberta taxpayers, but rather what is compliant with Sharia law, Muslim law. So there's already a clear precedent that's been set that in order to score political points, Danielle Smith will use taxpayers' money in ways that are arguably unnecessary and certainly unprecedented because there's no other financial crown corporation that makes decisions based purely on theological bases. Um, this is already a thing, and so it's not a leap to say if Danielle Smith will introduce theological business making decision models to crown corporations, it's not a leap to say she'll introduce Alberta First investment to these pension funds um, at potential great risk.
And that's, I think we'll differ on whether or not I think halal mortgages are a good idea, because I do. It's a whole different, that's like an entirely different episode, man. About, and particularly, I will tell everyone very, very quickly, the Quran does not allow the charging of interest. This is why it's problematic. There are ways to get around that are very creative. They do exist across Canada. Private corporations do these. The fact that we own a bank is still bonkers. I'm just going to keep using that word tonight. Word of the night, bonkers. And so, but again, you have a crown corporation supposed to be at arm's length from the government that is being mandated to make decisions based not on economic reasons, but on policy reasons, on political policy reasons. And so, I mean, part of the reason we have governments is to fill in gaps where we as a society have decided that the market will not work. Healthcare, education, things like that. We've decided that where the market would land is too expensive or not accessible enough, and so that's why we do these things. I've always had a big issue with governments crowding out, investment and the private enterprise. Government money is dumb money. I have it on a T-shirt, and so those are always going to be problematic things. But what it does show, and what that anecdote does show, is Smith's willingness and pattern of forcing what she wants, what her government wants, into control, like government controlled entities. And so the closer AIMCO becomes to being a very heavily government controlled entity, the more you're going to see that happen. The same thing would happen with an Alberta pension plan, which is again why the Alberta Party is against it. More control is not better. For a government that she loves to say she's a libertarian, but she's not. Back to the very first point we made, which is the doublespeak. None of this is libertarian. None of this is lines up with the ideological tenets of the UCP. I don't understand why the UCP is enough arms about this, the membership, because this is not what they signed up for.
I don't disagree. And to be clear, I'm not dunking on halal mortgages as a product. That's not at all what I'm doing. I love the idea of fees as opposed to interest, because I renegotiated my mortgage when the interest rates were not great. And if I could commit to 25 years at a set fee rate, that would provide a lot more stability. So I don't have a beef with halal mortgages as a product whatsoever. The concern that I have, and that I've certainly
wait, go back. No beef. Sorry.
Beef is allowed.
Childish puns, as long as it's halal.
That's exactly. But
there's no halal beef with halal mortgages.
Yeah, exactly. But that it brings to the point of the investment piece, because if the ATB had an investment opportunity with a corporation that was not considered to be halal or Sharia compliant, then they would not be able to use any of the money that had been pooled in the mortgage pool for those investments, which could potentially mean that taxpayers would not be getting the maximum return on an investment. So it's the same kind of problem. And I do, honestly, I don't care what religion it is. When financial decisions start to be made using taxpayers' money for theological reasons, I'm going to get squirrely no matter what the faith is.
For sure.
There's my
and it was not my intention to suggest otherwise. I
have been walking.
I just don't want anyone to walk away from this going like halal burgers are bad. They're not. I promise.
No, and they're not. They're not a bad product. And the question that we've been asking here on the show has been: this is a product that's already offered on the free market. Danielle Smith is a free market libertarian. Why is she directing a crown corporation to make theological decisions with taxpayers' money? That seems weird. It's almost as if there were votes in it or something. Before we move away from AIMCO, though, let's talk about the name. Because there has been a lot of speculation. There's nothing confirmed as of the date of this recording, which is November 14th. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time we get this out, it has been confirmed. So if it is, we got it right like days in advance. There is a name that has been soft announced, I think they would say in comm circles, for the next chair of AIMCO. It's a name that's well known not only to Albertans, but all Canadians, because it's a former prime minister. What is your immediate reaction to the prospect of Stephen Harper potentially, see what I did there, being appointed to the position of the chair of the board of AIMCO?
None of us are getting sued over this podcast.
My word, so carefully. I've learned.
As have I. I have so many feelings about this, and most of them are, I don't know that he's qualified to do this. I could think of dozens of people who would be as qualified, if not more qualified, significantly more qualified, eminently more qualified in this province to run AIMCO than Stephen Harper. I understand he needs something to do, apparently. It seems like we're on, the last couple of months have been a lot of former premiers and prime ministers, first ministers, if you will, showing back up in public life. I'll let you all Google the others. And so I just, although I will temper it with this. Stephen Harper is nobody's puppet. And so I don't know that this is going to go the way that Danielle Smith wants it to.
Interesting take.
My take is this. I think that and he would be a lot harder to fire than Evan was. A lot more political fallout than firing Evan Siddell. And so it's a risk. It's a gamble on the part of this premier to name someone as well known with I'm going to argue more political clout than she has. It would be an interesting experiment in seeing who has more control. Because I'm going to suspect that if he becomes the chair, he will have the control, not her.
I mean, you're probably not wrong. I don't remember the name of the former chair. I know Siddall was the CEO.
Sorry, he was the CEO. Yeah. It was. Who was it? Hold on. Mark Wiseman. That's what it was. Mark.
Whose name I don't know, which I'm almost more comfortable with, because I would prefer to have people who have extensive experience in pensions in the financial sector, less so than politics. Interestingly enough,
Wiseman came from the CPPIB, which is what you would expect to see, and a person who would be incredibly qualified to in fact have that job. Having a background in pension plans.
Here's my last question on AIMCO before we move on to the stuff that I know you're really excited to talk about. If you had to choose Danielle Smith naming, I'm just having fun now, the next chair of the board of AIMCO, on one hand, you have Stephen Harper. On the other hand, Preston Manning. Who do you go with?
Oh, that is hard. Oh man. Oof. Okay. I'm gonna say Stephen Harper. I don't know why you gave me these as options. Jesus.
I know because
I'm gonna I'm gonna
that's who she whose tires she pumps the most of the names that we see. It's
I suppose
those are the two that immediately came to mind for me, and one of them was right. So, well, maybe right at the time
maybe
of
right. At the time of recording, no one for sure has been named. But no, if I had to choose between those two, it would be Harper. It would be Harper. I have more faith in him having a less ideological bent. What are the words coming out of my mouth? How are you making this happen?
it's the pension Sophie's choice.
And on that note, let's move on.
Yeah. So from there, hey, you're the leader of a provincial party.
I am.
Are you, is the Alberta Party still a thing? What's going on there? Because
It is. It is. So we are in the process of, we actually just started our policy process. We are going to be spending the next 12 months doing some uh, policy development, having conversations around the province. I went on a little bit of a tour of the province, all the way up to Edmonton, Red Deer, Lethbridge, went down to Lethbridge, did some stuff in Calgary. For anyone who doesn't know me particularly well, I do have a back injury, and so traveling is a little difficult for me in person. So I'm trying to make my rounds as fast and as expediently as I can. Some great conversations. Yes, as you noted, Nate, I am very bad at social media. Leave me alone. Um, and so, although here's a plug for the Alberta Party and myself have joined Blue Sky. Come join us in the good place.
there you go.
Oh,
I want to ask about your policy process.
Yeah.
Are there any mechanisms, I'm curious, to how can I put this delicately, keep the crazy out? Because we saw a boatload of policies go forward at the UCP AGM, and it's at least half of them. It's inconceivable that those would have gone through and been brought forward at like a PC convention. I think it really only underscores how much the UCP is not the conservative party of your parents or your grandparents. But what's to stop? Is there a mechanism with the Alberta Party to stop the crazy from getting through?
Well, so there's a couple of things, but I think the most important part is our membership is less crazy. And at the end of the day, you do need to be a member to vote. But we are soliciting policies from far and wide, including subject matter experts who may not necessarily be part of the party, individuals, communities who maybe traditionally haven't been as involved in politics for whatever reason, whether that's institutional, whether it's an aversion to politics. I mean, like 99% of people don't actually care to participate as closely as we do. And not to say that they don't care about the outcomes, but politics still cares about you guys. But the idea is to really have a broader perspective than three dudes sitting in a back room writing stuff up. Ultimately, the process is still a very typical party process. It is submission of policies. We are going to be having online discussions and creating actually an online space for people to have their own discussions. That'll be launching in the new year. And at the end of the day, I think it's how do you keep out the crazy? Well, you make sure that you're bringing people to the table who have reasonable views, have reasonable um, uh, outlooks, and are here to do good for the province. Part of that starts with making sure that we're all rowing in the same direction. And so that means putting together a couple of things that'll be coming out for us are going to be not only the principles of what the Alberta Party actually stands for, which is always a common complaint in the last few elections, that people are never really sure what we stand for. So that is actually something that we're at the board level working on in terms of what does the party stand for, and some actual concrete answers to that very philosophical question. And the other is, like I said, and part of politics for me at least has always been that we have a lot more in common in Canada across all parties than we disagree about. And so part of that is, making sure that we're all, if we're saying, what do we want the future to look like? What does Alberta 2040 look like? And so, for us, it's, making sure that everyone has, basic necessities met, that we're working on economic equity, as well as social equity, as well as, creating a prosperous environment and a regulatory environment in which people can come and build and prosper. I realize that's repetitive. And so it's, if we're all working toward the same goal, if we can agree about the goal, which I think across the aisle we can, the question simply becomes, how do we get there? And I think if we can agree about where we're going, the disagreements about how we get there will become more civilized. They will become a place where people want to participate and have that conversation, because right now no one does. Right now it's a lot of yelling at each other, talking past each other, and not sitting down and listening to the underlying issues, to a lot of the underlying disagreements, because I think, the longer you sit, or the more you're able to have a civil conversation, the more civilized, our society becomes, and the more community minded our society becomes. And I think that those are all incredibly important things that people feel we've lost. And so for me and for the party, and at least until they kick me out as leader, because I am still the interim leader, no matter what you say, Nate. That is going to be the focus of our policy, of our platform, of our work in the community. It's community first, it is community focused, and it is putting together the best set of policies so that Alberta can be the best province it can be. I know it sounds really hokey, and it sounds like we're on Barney and Friends, but I truly, truly believe, I don't know what it was in the pandemic where I became the person who all of a sudden was like, be kind to each other. And you never know what words you say that are going to hurt somebody or make their day. So it's just, honestly, it's the little things we all do that can make this so much better. Taking the time to listen. Our society is a series of sound bites that make it really easy to be confrontational. There's absolutely no nuance in things like Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. Or, TBD on Blue Sky, or whatever the other ones are. Again, I'm not good at social media. I don't care. I live my life out in the real world with real people. And, but even I would say I actually, so when I was in Lethbridge, I sat down with Jeff Park, who is, he's the head of all the parental rights groups here in Alberta. We fundamentally disagree about policies, but he's a nice guy. We've been friends for years. He invited me into his home. He's going to hate me for saying this out loud. But we can have a civil conversation and truly get to the root of where our disagreement is and find common ground about how we can come up with policies that are going to help on both sides, or that are going to get us all into a better place. And we can debate the nuance, and we can debate like little things, but then it becomes just the little things that we're debating, and not the big things like should trans kids be alive. And so that is what we're doing here at the Alberta Party. I was gonna have all of these like as soon as the Calgary Public Library lets me book stuff online again. Sad broken heart, Calgary Public Library. For everyone who doesn't know, they had a giant cyber attack, and they're still not up to their server is still not completely up. So a lot of you still got to go in and do stuff. We're gonna be having some in-person meetings. Oh, the Calgary Public Library.
Pour one out for the Calgary Public Library.
Two facts.
I got two questions that I want to ask about the Alberta Party piece. The first one is, would we saw with a lot of the, again, I'll go with batshit policies that the UCP introduced at their policy convention and voted through every single one, which I think really can't be underscored heavily enough. We did not see condemnation of any of those policies from Danielle Smith, despite the fact that several of them went against her stated personal beliefs. She did not at any point say, this is not who I want this party to be. This is not the kind of leadership that I want to provide. If the Alberta Party was to bring forward policies that were in line with some of the policies that we saw from the UCP AGM, could people expect, if you haven't been kicked out yet, could people expect you to speak out against policies that you found to be personally offensive?
Of course. I'm not very good at keeping my opinions to myself.
That's why I love having you on the
show. No, I think, leader, interim leader, whatever, I'm still a member of the party. I'm still entitled to my opinion, and I will make it known. Now, that also means that I'm not going to be able to, I don't think that it's the job of the executive or the leader to stop things from coming forward, but it doesn't mean I can't voice exactly how I feel.
Fair enough. The other question that I had is, you mentioned a trip to Lethbridge. Perhaps did you stop in Lethbridge West at all? Because I hear there's maybe a by-election coming up there in the next, I think they only have 4 months left to call it.
January.
Yeah. That's like 4 months, roughly. Is the Alberta Party going to field a candidate?
We are. So we are. So we're just finalizing who it's going to be now. So I'm not going to give anything away. But we will be on the ballot, and the commitment, of course, from day one, my commitment was we will run someone in every by-election. We'll run as many people as we can get out. If we get all 87, we will run all 87. And so this party is here to win. We're here to play, and we're here to hold whatever government it is to account. And apparently also the opposition. It's fine.
That leads to my next question.
And it's not me.
Well, you said you weren't going to run in our last interview. You said you never run.
That's still happening.
Okay. So I figured it wasn't you.
I'm just reiterating for everyone who may or may not have listened to the last one. I am still not running. I found another human being.
There's two of you now.
At least.
The next question that I have then is, where do you see it's going to be a fascinating by-election, because it's going to be a bit of a temperature taking for the political climate in Alberta. A lot of people don't realize, Lethbridge has a reputation, and for some reasons it's a well-earned reputation, but for a lot of reasons it's not a fair reputation. They're many people would probably be surprised at how forward-thinking and progressive Lethbridge can be, despite being a lot of very old stock Southern Alberta. So who is the Alberta Party going to be trying to speak to uh, in that by-election? I mean, the Alberta Party has consistently had a very socially progressive bent, but we have seen the UCP kind of abdicate their home for former progressive conservatives. Um, is the Alberta Party going to be a home for progressive conservatives in that Lethbridge by-election, or is where are you looking to set up shop there, Lindsay?
Right in the middle, my friend. And so, what I would say is, well, are we looking to be a home for former PCs? Yes. Are we looking to be a home for people who think that the NDP has gone too far to the left? Also, yes. Former, provincial liberals who don't have any representation, people who generally don't like politics, but are fed up with what's going on. The list goes on. We're here to represent Albertans, and so to that end, the answer is you can't be everything to everyone, but you can be a lot of things to a lot of people. And so I think that the joy always of by-elections is that it doesn't necessarily change the government, and in fact, it will not change the government. So this is going to be an opportunity for Albertans to have their voice heard, whether it's against this government, against the opposition. Lethbridge West, of course, was formerly held by the NDP, and so I think that this is a time and a place for Albertans to stand up and say, like, none of this is working, because, like, let's be honest, none of this is working. It's the conversation. We have two parties talking at cross purposes to each other, and no one is having a conversation. And most importantly, we need to be having a conversation with Albertans and what they're going through. Like, and we'll talk about this in a second, I know, but there's been a lot of focus, of course, on transgender individuals and trans legislation. And while it is very important, most Albertans care about putting food on their tables, making sure they can pay to change into their winter tires, and are they going to be able to heat their homes all winter? These things are getting expensive. They're already expensive. And we need to be looking at what the vast majority of people are struggling with, because people are struggling. And this government and this opposition seem pretty tone deaf to the realities of what it means to go to work every day, put food on the table, take care of your kids, take care of your parents, take care of your siblings, take care of your farm, take care of everything. And most people, I think, are just exhausted after all of that and just want some help and just want someone who's going to focus on the things that matter to them. And that's what we're here to do. And I'm not saying things like transgender rights aren't important, because they are. But we need to be focused on what is going on the ground. And that is not where this government, no one in this legislature is focused on what's really happening.
I want to spend a little bit of time on the policies, the anti-trans policies that you've talked about, and that the UCP have introduced into the legislature. I know that we've made light a little bit of proposed policies, proposed legislation, but the reality is that the UCP do have a majority. There have not been any MLAs or ministers who have stepped out of line on any of these policies or condemned any of these policies. So I think it's almost a certainty that this legislation will pass. It will face legal challenges. I do want to talk about that, but I want to, before we get into that, there's one thing that I want to ask about, maybe challenge you on a little bit. You said that one of the demographics that the Alberta Party is interested in pursuing is people who feel that the NDP has moved too far to the left. I'm curious, do you think that's still true? Because there's a lot of people who look at the election of Nahad Nenshi and go, this moves the NDP not to the left, but more to the center?
Show me one thing he's done that's moved them to the center.
Well, they can't really do anything right now.
One policy that he's changed that has moved them to the center. One statement he's made. One statement he's made that's moved them to the center. He has done nothing to move that party anywhere. And granted, I will say that hasn't been a lot of time. They haven't had a policy convention, which is what you were going to say. I'm aware. But it's going to start at some point or it's never going to happen. And it has yet to happen. So until that happens, those people are still politically homeless. Right.
Okay.
And so I don't think anything has changed in that respect, or at least not that I've heard or felt or absorbed from people that I've talked to. And so, to that extent, the answer is still, yeah, we are looking to, take all of it. Everyone who's reasonable, everyone who's in the center, everyone who but also people who are just here. Honestly, I don't care if you're on the left or on the right. If you're here to make this a better place and you're willing to have a reasonable conversation about it, we're here for you too. It's big tent politics, and this is how you govern without the crazy.
Good answer. You kind of have already addressed your position to some degree. The question that I've been asking anybody who has any kind of leadership role is, I think you're 100% right. I think the vast majority of Albertans are far more concerned with their economic reality. I think they're far more concerned about the fact that they can't access health care. I think they're far more concerned about the fact that we're hemorrhaging physicians in the province than they are the issues that Danielle Smith has created around healthcare for trans kids suffering from or experiencing gender dysphoria. So the question I've been asking people in positions of leadership is, what do you want to say to the kids? It's a small group, the youth, that these policies are unnecessarily and unfairly, and by many legal interpretations, and I'll ask for yours as well, a violation of the charter. What do you want to say to those kids?
There are hundreds and hundreds of people out there rooting for you. It does get better. It sucks that you're the subject of all of this, but we are fighting for you. We are fighting for you to be the person that you want to be, that you are meant to be. And we take this deadly seriously. Please do not give up while we fight. We will always be here for you. And I'm going to get a little.
I think everybody is. I've choked up on the show more than a couple of times. I've also been exceedingly angry on the show about these policies more than a couple of times. So I don't think
they break my heart. They absolutely break my heart.
I don't think authenticity is something to be embarrassed of, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So I'll vamp for a minute and
while I put myself together.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to operate under the assumption, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to operate under the assumption that your legal interpretation is probably the same as pretty much every other legal scholar out there, that these policies do represent a charter violation.
Correct. It is a Section 7 violation.
And I've heard that it might also be Section 15 too. So,
yeah, well, I can see how it might be a Section 15 violation. So just back up. Section 7 is life, liberty, and security of the person. Section 15 is discrimination based on enumerated grounds and analogous grounds that have been added. And of course, gender and sexuality are obviously have been, notwithstanding that they're not actually in the charter, at least some of them aren't in the charter. They have been found to be analogous grounds, so are covered. But Section 7 violations are by far the more important of the two. Security of the person, and the right to get medical treatment, are profoundly important. Profoundly important. And I cannot stress enough that even if I could find a way to say that any of this was okay, it will get struck down. And again, this is just I'm gonna not the most important part of any of this, but it is a waste of taxpayers' dollars.
No, it 100% is.
Yeah. In no way is that the most important part of any of this, but it is annoying. And I'm going to make light of that so that I stop crying. And so, super problematic. I mean, I'm not by no means am I a constitutional scholar. I buy and sell businesses for a living. There are many smarter lawyers out there than I am. But this is going to play out in the courts for a long time to come if this is not reversed. And so I have problems with it there from that perspective. But ultimately, why the government thinks they should be involved in anyone's medical care or making decisions about anyone's medical care is beyond me. And again, I'm going to go back to my word of the episode, which is bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. It reminds me of there's a short poem. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's first they came for the Jews, and I said nothing because I wasn't Jewish. Then they came for the communists, and I said nothing because I wasn't communist. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I said nothing because I wasn't a trade unionist. And then they came for me, and there was no one to speak.
I like the updated version of that poem, which is
whatever. It's the original.
I'll tell you the updated version I saw last night. First, they came for the Tran kids, and I stood up and I said, "Not on my fucking watch," because I've read the fucking poem.
Well said. Well fucking said.
Right? There's my
there
F-bombs.
You go.
Sorry, Mom.
Also my mom. Oh.
Okay. Is there anything else you want people to hear? Is there anything else you want people to know? Is there an Alberta Party event happening anytime in the foreseeable future that you want to plug? Floor's yours.
Fair. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, ultimately, what do I want people to know? What do I want people to hear? I want people to know that your involvement doesn't have to be contentious. You can have a reasonable conversation, and there is a place for that here at the Alberta Party, no matter what your views are. What I want people to hear is that we are going to keep fighting every day for Albertans. It doesn't matter how small the issue, how big the issue, we're here to take that on and to be your voice. And I can't think of a better group of people to do it with than the people who have shown up and are working every day to make this place, this world and this province a better place. I have nothing but respect for people who put their name on the ballot. But I am going to sit here and criticize people who are taking the power they've been given for granted, and using it in ways that are not good for our province, are not good for our community, and are not good for our democracy. We've seen what's happened south of the border. I mean, I think that we can say, at least today, that the vast majority of Albertans are better qualified to sit in the U.S. executive cabinet than the U.S. executive cabinet. Things could be worse. They could. But I would really rather not get there. And to that end, if I ever get a booking at the Calgary Public Library, we won't be having an event on December 7th.
What's it going to be?
Sad face Calgary Library. But please do. We are posting everything up on albertaparty.ca/events. Please keep an eye on that space. Seek us out on Twitter, X, whatever. We started our Blue Sky account, albertaparty.bluesky.social. And we will be pushing and plugging everything. If you sign up to connect on our website. You will get an email about it. You will get 10 emails about it. They're all from me. It's just me, sadly, sitting here asking people to come hang out with me because I have no real friends. Nate, apparently we're not real friends.
That's not fair.
We are real friends, I think.
You think so?
But you know, we just finished a huge series of events online and in person, and so just taking a minute to recoup from that, and also work because I again still have a more than full-time day job. And so, but we are actively looking for volunteers, and I don't know. I think we're pretty cool to hang out with. Just sign up for a membership now. You'll get a fun personal card from me for Christmas. Because that's what I'm doing right now. So, I am writing so many Christmas cards, guys. I'm a big fan. I'm very old school. I love Christmas cards. People are working, and keep voicing your opinions, keep protesting, keep showing up to the Alberta resistance, keep showing up to, but do it with kindness, do it with compassion in your hearts, and a view to a better future for everybody.
Beautiful note to end it on, Lindsay. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat tonight, and being willing to be authentic. That's something that I always respect. And I really do enjoy our banter and the fact that we can have a conversation where we're making all kinds of dumb jokes, but we can also have serious conversations from a place of real authenticity. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's it for another episode of The Breakdown. As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here, we would love nothing more than if you thought about signing up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where for just the price of a fancy cup of coffee a month, you can help us continue to produce this kind of content. Whether you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, in which case, maybe leave a review and a rating, or whether you're watching it on one of our streaming platforms, we want to say a big thank you to everybody who is part of the Breakdown's audience. And as always, take care of each other and keep the conversation going.